Hey everybody, good afternoon. Thanks for being here today. My name's Laura Bolio and I'm the VP of Marketing here at Holistiplan. I am super pumped to introduce you to Ms. Megan Dowd. She's our Director of Product for Insurance. She has 4 incredibly specific insurance designations, of which I cannot name off the top of my head, but they are amazing. High leverage for sure. She is our insurance expert here at Holistiplan, and what we're talking about today is a topic that's right around the corner. So we have Memorial Day coming up as the official kickoff to the summer, and this is going to be all about how to protect your clients from getting burned and all of the different things that could happen. It could be problematic for your clients over the summer. Before we dive into it, yes, this will be recorded. We will send out the recording and the slides shortly after the presentation within the next couple of days. And this is also eligible for 1 CFP CE credit. So you do need to be here live. That's the catch. You have to be here live and you have to be here for the whole thing for it to apply for your credit. So if you're watching this as a recording, just know you got to get here live to the next one. So with that, please direct any questions that you have into the Q&A. We love to have a very active audience. We love to have you folks engaged. And Megan, I mean, she knows pretty much everything there is to know about insurance. So I love watching Megan answer questions. I learned so much from these. And with that, I would love to hand it over to Megan.
Thank you so much, Laura. Appreciate everyone joining this afternoon. So, as Laura mentioned, we're going to be talking about summer fun and how to protect your clients. A little bit about me, if you haven't attended one of our webinars before joining Holistiplan, I spent 15 years as an insurance broker, primarily working with financial advisors that needed support with their clients' insurance needs. I wrote a book last year called Protect Your Lifestyle, Making Empowered, Educated, and Effective Personal Insurance Decisions, with the audience really being heads of households and financial advisors to help give them a better understanding of why insurance is wealth defense and how it can just help in the overall planning you do with clients. As Laura mentioned, I'm extremely passionate about education, not only to advisors, but for myself. So I have a handful of designations. Excuse me. And then when I'm not at work, I do enjoy spending time with my family, riding horses, and reading. So today we're going to talk through different ways clients get burned, safe travel tips, just a few client case studies, and then obviously helping your clients enjoy a worry-free summer. So, just some statistics to start off the meeting. The months of July and August, or sorry, June, July, and August are known as the 100 deadliest days when it comes to traffic fatalities. So, obviously, with summer months coming up, auto insurance becomes a big topic of conversation. Also in 2023, there were over 3,800 boating accidents. And as you can see, over 500 deaths, 2,000 plus injuries, and over $63 million in damage to property done by watercraft. So a lot can happen when your clients are on the water. And then lastly, gas grills cause a lot of fires, on average around 9,000 a year. And as you'll notice, those peak months are in the summer when our clients are outside enjoying the weather. And so, again, this is just a good time to check in, make sure they have the right insurance coverages. So if they do experience one of these losses, they're not scrambling to figure things out and or finding themselves undercovered and overexposed. So what are some different ways clients get burned? The first family we're going to talk through is the Lakin family. They live for the summer with this one going to be the best one yet. They recently completed a dock renovation of around $125,000 to their home in Minnesota, complete with a live-in kitchen, ample space to store their new boat and jet skis. And on this lakefront property is really where they get away. They're going to enjoy time with friends and family around the fire. And what's a better way to kick off the summer than hosting their daughter's graduation party at the new lake house? And obviously, the celebration is just the start to a full season of fun, connection, and lifelong memories. The Lakin family has a net worth around $1.5 million and growing. Obviously, they live an active lifestyle, and personal insurance is really going to be important, not only to protect what they have now, but what they have in the future. And so, what do the Lakens currently have for coverage? Right now, they have their dwelling insured for about 1.2 million at the lake house. Just like any standard homeowners policy, they're going to extend that 10% to about 120,000 in coverage for their dock that they just built and spent a nice penny on. They also have 100,000 in liability, as that's the requirement in order to qualify for the umbrella coverage that they do have. They have $1,000 in med pay, and then their watercrafts have 100,000 per person, 300,000 per accident and liability. This is purchased from a different company than their umbrella policy, so we'll talk through why this can be an issue. And then they haven't ever really thought about the coverage or really any exposure that comes along with hosting this graduation party for their daughter here in a few weeks. So while this coverage looks good, there is some optimal coverage that really should be considered for the Lakin family to make sure everything they're doing is protected. One of those is their dwelling is a little underinsured, so the proper dwelling coverage should be around 1.5 million. Their other structures is also underinsured. They should have around 200,000 based on that new dock that they just installed and the other additional structures on premise. The liability is a little low based on their net worth being $1.5 million. Today, with the $1 million they have in umbrella coverage plus the 100,000 they have in personal liability, they only have 1.1 million. So again, leaving some exposure there. Um, Medical payments is a little low, especially for them hosting. Ideally, we'd like to see 10,000 or more. Medical payments is really important because this is a coverage that pays out to guests for no fault. So your clients don't have to get sued for this. This is just a way for them to make their clients whole again for minor injuries that might occur and that are very frequent when guests are around water. Also, the watercraft policy potentially increasing those limits to better protect them as well as fill in a gap that they currently have. And then lastly, a special events policy to help protect while there's a larger amount than normal guest on property, as well as liquor being served. So some policies do have liquor exclusions when it comes to homeowners, others do not. And obviously, the occasion in which the liquor is being served makes a difference. Special events policy can help clear up all of that gray area, which is why we consider it optimal coverage in this situation with the Lakins. So really, what are the gaps between what they currently have and what they should have? And those gaps range, but the first is around $300,000 in dwelling coverage. So again, based on the rebuild cost, not the market value, the cost to rebuild the home, which is things like architect plans, debris removal, the actual cost of labor and lumber is closer to that 1.5. So if the clients did experience a total loss today, they'd be out of pocket about $300,000. Other structures, they'd be out of pocket around $80,000. Right now, we're in tornado season. So I live in Missouri. That is an unlikely situation where a client's home and other structures could be taken out at the same time. So right there, that's a pretty big number between the two. They also have about a $400,000 gap in liability potentially based on their overall net worth and the current liability coverages they do have around 400,000. The special events policy, again, will just help increase the liability for the day. So typically with special events policies, your clients can buy $1 million in coverage, as well as that includes that liquor liability. So just better protecting for the event itself. For the watercraft, there's a $75,000 per person gap potentially and a $250,000 per accident gap in order to qualify for the umbrella before it kicks in. Um, and then, oh, sorry, that's for the permissive user. So, what we have noticed on watercraft policies and others is insurance companies now have lower limits for permissive users, meaning only drivers listed on the policy are going to get this full 100, 300 coverage that we see listed. However, if it's a permissive user, they're only going to get 25,000 per accident. Per person, 50,000 per accident. So again, that permissive user has a decent gap. And then an even larger gap comes into play between what the umbrella requires the watercraft policy to have in place and what's actually in place. So what this means is if someone's driving the new boat and they get in a large accident, the current watercraft policy will pay out the first 100,000, but then your client's going to be stuck paying out anywhere from 150 to 200,000 before their $1 million umbrella kicks in. So this is just an example again of the Lakin family and really how their current coverages apply, where they could really look to optimize it and kind of how those gaps lay out across all the different policies that are currently in place. We then have Cruz. Cruz is a successful young professional that's going to go enjoy and embrace the flexibility she has to work remote. She's going to go to Europe and explore and be as inspired as possible. While abroad, she will be renting a car to explore. She's also bringing her high end camera to document the journey. While she's exploring, her condo back in New York is going under renovation. And so she'll have a lot going on with valuables being brought with her to do the traveling, as well as just her overall lifestyle calls for thoughtful insurance planning to ensure protection both at home and abroad. So, when it comes to Cruise, her current coverages, she has interior coverage for her condo for the semi-custom quality that it is, meaning there's, laminate countertops, higher end cabinetry, some carpeting in the unit and different things like that. She also has personal property, but it only provides coverage in the United States and its territory. So once she leaves the United States, all of her belongings that she has with her will no longer be covered. Her camera is also covered within personal property. We'll talk through why that's an issue in the optimal coverage section. Her auto also is only covering her in the United States. So it does not provide any type of international coverage. And then lastly, she only has 2,500 in business personal property, business property within her current homeowners, which is going to potentially leave her exposed based on her business property she'll be taking with her. So, what's the optimal coverage for Cruise? One, it's increasing her interior coverage to the custom quality that she's having done in the unit, meaning she's going to have granite countertops. She'll be doing some upgrades to the custom cabinetry. She's going to be putting in all new hardwood flooring. So, really making those adjustments to the current policy to include all the new enhancements that she's made. Another thing is coverage during the renovation. So, a lot of clients don't always think to call their insurance professional before renovation starts. But what we know is there's a lot of issues that arise once clients start renovation. So whether that's a higher deductible that's placed on the policy during that course of construction and or coverages being excluded based on the work being done. So again, optimal coverage in Cruise's situation would include some type of protection during the renovations. Also expanding her personal property and liability to be worldwide, possibly considering some valuables coverage for that camera. Some cameras, especially the one Cruise has, is pretty expensive. It's around $10,000 for all the equipment. So if it accidentally gets left in the car while she's enjoying lunch and someone steals it, she's probably going to want to replace that. And having a valuables policy will allow her to do that easily and without paying a deductible. And then lastly, again, making sure that auto liability is extending internationally and or she's purchasing rental car coverage. I personally believe in both having auto liability that extends internationally and potentially buying rental car coverage. I'm happy to talk through why that is. And then lastly, she'll have to possibly consider increasing business property to around 7,500 just to better protect the computer that she has with the software that's on it in order for her to complete her job. So, between what Cruise currently has and what would be that really optimal coverage are these gaps. So, one of them is about $150,000 in that interior updates that she's doing to the condo. Limitations, obviously, during those renovations if she doesn't disclose. So, like I mentioned, there's exclusions. There can be issues if she signs a waiver of subrogation and/or just higher deductibles applied. She also has about a $7,500 gap for her camera, and that's because within a personal homeowner's policy, a lot of times there's sublimits for things like cameras, anywhere from like $1,000 to 2,500. So in her situation, she would want to consider that valuables policy to protect the full value of the camera, as well as when it's insured, just on the homeowner's policy as personal property, the deductible would apply. So depending on what deductible Cruise has on her condo, maybe it's 2,500 or more. Having to pay that out in order to get the camera replaced may frustrate her or something she may not want to do. So, again, just a great conversation to have and understand if she would want to use insurance to replace the camera if it's stolen during her travels. And then, again, no coverage for personal property while she's abroad. While she probably won't have too much clothing with her, that liability exposure really is there, whether she may injure somebody while she's abroad, or if maybe she damages one of the rentals that she's staying in. A lot can happen, and that extension of liability really brings a peace of mind for them to enjoy those vacations. And then lastly, that business personal property coverage and considering increasing that for the computer. Oh, and then lastly, the main reason I think it's important that clients consider both auto insurance and rental car excuse me, is because auto insurance is going to extend them their uninsured and their underinsured motorist coverage while they're pedestrian, bicyclists. So again, a lot of times when clients are traveling, they're walking, riding bikes, and that auto policy, if it does include worldwide liability, can help extend those additional coverages to them while they're out and about. And then we have the Winslow family. So the Winslow family, they're going to have a fun-filled summer ahead. They're going to keep things running smoothly by hiring a nanny who will have full access to the family's vehicles and golf carts to take the kids to the local pool and daytime activities. Their son's also getting into the entrepreneurial spirit, and he plans to earn some extra money by mowing the lawns of neighbors. On evenings and weekends, the family loves to ride their electric bikes around the neighborhood, enjoying the shops and ice cream. The Winslow's family backyard is also the go-to hangout spot with a trampoline, outdoor games, and plenty of space to play. With the active lifestyle they live, the frequent visitors, and multiple moving parts from childcare to golf carts to backyard play, the Winslow Summer Fun comes with a lot of unique risk that can often be overlooked and important to consider in an insurance program. So, when it comes to the Winslow family, they currently have around 500,000 in homeowners liability right now. They have electric bike and trampoline, but their current policy has exclusions for both of those. And it's not uncommon to see electric bikes excluded from homeowners policies. And same with trampolines. They don't actually have any coverage for the golf cart at this point, even though they use it on the road. There was just never really any thought when they bought it. They paid cash and they just moved on with life. And there might even be some assumption that it's covered on the homeowners policy, which in some states it can be, but there's also limitations to the golf cart has to remain on premise in order for coverage to extend. So always getting a separate golf cart policy is the best practice. And then they do have good auto liability limits, the 250, 500. But just like we saw in the watercraft policy for the Lakens, this auto policy also has limitations when there's a permissive user driving. And then they do have lower uninsured and underinsured limits, 100, 300. They've had a lot of rate increases in their state in the last few years. And so this was something that they did to help keep the overall rate down on their auto. But as we know, that really can expose them because 1 in 7 drivers in the US has no auto insurance. And this is the uninsured motorist coverage is how your clients get that protection. So knowing what we know about their current coverages, the optimal coverages for this client would be one, consider separate policy for electric bikes and golf carts. Again, electric bikes are these newer things in the world that your typical bicycle is covered under a homeowner's policy. The liability is covered. There's no issues. But the second you put a motor on something, your homeowner's policy becomes very gray in what and how it's going to cover those motorized vehicles, as they call them. So the electric bikes really do call for a separate policy. Same with those golf carts. Sometimes the assumption is that golf carts are used in like golf communities, but we have seen an expansion of golf carts being used on major roads to go around in local communities. And in those situations, their own liability is necessary, not only if someone gets injured, but in case there's any type of property that may be damaged. Also, an exclusion for that trampoline. Maybe when this policy was originally purchased, the clients didn't have a trampoline, so that exclusion wasn't a big deal. But now that they have the trampoline, a bunch of kids jumping on it on a weekly basis, not having any liability coverage if a child gets injured on that trampoline is a huge exposure for them. They also have the liability for family members on premise, just for different pieces of those. Obviously, the nanny driving the auto policy has some issues, more so with the permissive user drop down limits, but also us wanting to add the nanny as a driver just to make sure there's no issues while she's doing so, and or consider if that nanny is going to be driving the children in her car. And if that's the case, maybe reviewing the nanny's policy to make sure her or his auto limits are sufficient for the children to be in the car. And then we also obviously want to consider workers' comp and employment practices liability for our individuals that have those nannies in household. Workers' comp will help pay out if someone or if that nanny gets injured. So whether it's, just slipping on the stairs while taking care of the daily tasks to something more serious, the workers' comp will pay medical pay, lost wages, medical benefits, and it kind of caps it at 2/3 and limits the ability for those employees to usually sue your client. So again, just a good way to help take care of those individuals, but also protect the clients you work with. And then the employment practices liability is for things like discrimination, sexual harassment, wrongful termination. So while this is just a summer employee, that might not be as big of a concern. Allegations are always a thing, and with these coverages comes liability, which also comes defense coverage, which may be necessary at time of allegation. And then lastly, just increasing the uninsured and underinsured motorist coverage to match the 250, 500 liability that they have for bodily injury to best protect themselves and their family while they're in the car. So, again, what are the quick gaps that these all cause between the current and optimal coverage? One is that 500,000 in liability for the electrical bikes that they have in those golf carts. Same for the trampoline, wanting to increase that to match the homeowner's liability. Potentially considering third-party liability for their children while they're on other people's premise. So, third-party liability, you can usually get up to about $1 million in coverage for a couple $100 a year. But if, again, these children were at a friend's house and they were severely injured and the friends do not have any insurance, the third party on this policy could help pay out. We talked through the EPLI and workers' comp for the nanny. Again, there's a large gap, about $225,000 while the nanny's driving the vehicle between the umbrella and the current auto policy limits if she's not added. So, wanting to make sure she's added in those situations. And then lastly, increasing the uninsured motorist, like we discussed, mainly a lot of times, again, these kids, the families out riding their bikes on main roads. If they're hit by a driver who has state minimum coverage or not enough coverage, they can, again, have some peace of mind that on their own auto policy, they do have those limits to help make themselves whole again. And with certain companies and in certain states, they can actually buy additional coverage on their umbrella. And then the last person is Cole, and then I'll take some questions. So Cole is planning a multi-day hike in the mountains. He loves to experience and push himself physically and mentally. When he's not on the trails, he will be back on the lake, making the most of his hydro board, perfecting tricks and spending time on the water. With the lifestyle built around high energy, recreational, remote travel, and valuable gear, Cole knows that there's a lot at stake. He also just recently received a really nice watch as a gift and wants to, enjoy it and wear it whenever possible. And so, for someone like Cole, whose adventure, it isn't just a hobby; it's a way of life. And the right coverage can make sure that he can always enjoy that without any worry. And so for Cole, he's a renter. He's got 150,000 in personal property. When we talk about personal property, think about taking his unit, dumping it upside down. Everything that falls out is considered personal property. He has 100,000 in liability because that's all he needed to get into the rental that he's in. He has no coverage for his hydro board, which is no one knows what a hydro board is. It's basically a surfboard with a remote on the back of it that makes you go. So it can go pretty fast and pretty high. He has basic auto coverage of 50,000 per person, 100,000 per accident, and he has no umbrella at this point, even though his net worth is around 800,000, of which 400,000 of that is creditor accessible, meaning it's not in a 401k or in some states, wrapped up in a home that is protected. So, what would be optimal coverage for Cole? One would be excess medical for his adventurous lifestyle. So while Cole has the basic health insurance, he might have some additional needs that arise, especially when he's out hiking. If he's in the middle of nowhere, there might need to be some medical evacuation. If he's severely injured, the average medical evac can be anywhere from 25,000 upwards of six figures. So again, this could be a big piece to the way he lives and making sure he's properly protected. A lot of medical policies don't only have to be for when clients go abroad. A lot of them do provide coverage as long as clients excuse me, are a specific distance away from the home. So a lot of times that distance can be, 50 miles to 100 miles. So in Cole's situation, a travel policy may even be a great idea for him, even though he stays within the United States. He also has 500,000 liability would be a great investment for him. One, the difference between 100,000 and 500,000 on a renter's policy is like 15 or $20 a year. So pennies on the dollar when it comes to the protection. Also, he's currently underinsured by not having that limit of liability. Also, obviously, getting some coverage for that hydro board that he has, considering coverage for the watch that he received, increasing his auto to 500,000 combined single limit, and then obviously adding an umbrella policy to protect his creditor accessible assets. So, what gaps does Cole have? He's got about a $13,000 gap for his watch. Again, he does have a little bit of coverage baked into his renter's policy within the personal property for these sorts of items, but based on the value, he definitely may want to add that as a rider. We talked about the medical evacuation coverage and why that could be an important consideration for someone that lives a life like Cole. Obviously, 500,000 in liability would make a lot of sense for that hydro board, especially if he lets guests use it. Obviously, the liability is not going to protect him while he's riding it, but if he were to damage another boat or damage or injure other people while he's in the use of it, that's where that 500,000 really can become important. And then based on his current liability of only 100,000, he does have about $300,000 exposed in assets, and then auto does leave him exposed around 350,000. So again, a decent amount of exposure for someone that lives a pretty simple life. There's still a lot of different considerations that come into play that can again be transferred to insurance if the client should choose so. So before I talk a little bit about travel tips, do we have any questions on those stories? Okay, perfect. So some travel tips. First, it comes personal coverage. This is going to be like valuable items. I've said this in other webinars, but it's really important that clients don't travel with all of their valuable items. While it's fun to show them off and wear them, it's really important that they only bring what's necessary. One, theft increases a lot while clients are on vacation. Individuals look for people wearing nice things and will take it literally right off their backs. I've had multiple clients have that happen. Other times, clients will leave things in the safe at the hotel rooms, but those safes codes are easily changed and they come back and items are gone. So, again, just being really considerate about the valuable items that they bring. Personal property, understanding if they have coverage outside the US, if they are traveling internationally. I've had other clients that go and stay at, a home for the summer and they bring quite a bit of personal property. Sometimes there's limitations within the standard homeowners policy of 10% of coverage can extend off premise. So again, in certain situations that might need to be adjusted for clients. Be careful about what your clients post. There's a significant increase in the amount of burglaries that happen when clients leave. And a lot of times it's because clients or their children have posted that we're getting ready to leave, we're on the plane, we're in the Hamptons, wherever they are. They're very clearly notifying the local bad people that their homes are open, no one's there. And again, we see just a huge increase in the summer of theft and burglaries, a lot of that due to social media. And then again, liability limitations, both within the US and in other countries. For medical, or excuse me, for travel insurance, there's a few different pieces of travel insurance. I'm a huge fan of excess medical. Like I mentioned, in Cole's situation, medical evacuations are not uncommon, but they are pretty common, especially for individuals that like to experience life. Be aware of exclusions, though. It's not uncommon for things like scuba diving, or even like ATVs to be excluded from medical coverage on travel policies. So, depending on what your clients are doing, investing in the right travel policy is important. When it comes to trip cancellation and trip interruption, I'm less excited about those because I think there's a lot of red tape in order to use them. However, for the clients that are investing in those really expensive cruises, or I had a client that was taking a golf trip to Ireland and they were spending, I think it was about $40,000 a person to go there between the golfing, the travel, the hotels, and all of that. those situations, the trip cancellation, trip interruptions do make sense because it's such a large investment. But again, reading the fine print is really important because if a client gets sick, but it is a current condition, there might not be coverage in place. So while travel insurance is great, just like any other insurance, it has its red tape. And it's important to make sure that your clients aren't just getting it to check the box, but they really understand the coverages that are there and really the limitations that may apply. And then lastly, cyber, because obviously wherever we and our clients are, they're going to be connected to something. So use a VPN, which is a private network that your clients can use just to make sure that hackers have a less likelihood of getting into their stuff. Don't connect to unsecure Wi-Fi networks. So whether that's the hotel, the local coffee shop, clients have a tendency to over trust the internet when it comes to Wi-Fi connections. They'll log into the local coffee shop, they'll get on to their bank accounts, they'll start transferring money for the day. And a lot of times there's a hacker or someone sitting nearby that can actually see all those keystrokes happening and makes your client a very vulnerable target while they're, again, trying to enjoy vacation. And then lastly, Bluetooth enabled devices can actually get viruses. So whether that's connecting your Bluetooth to the rental cars, connecting, Bluetooth to other devices while traveling, it's really important to understand that they can get into your cell phones. And from there, if you're like me and you do your work and pleasure within your cell phone, you have a large exposure of what can happen. So just keeping clients aware that whether it's they're connecting to the internet or they're using Bluetooth, both of those are ways for hackers to get in to their lives and potentially expose a lot of financial devastation. So, what are some coverages in action? So, this first one is the pool party. A client installed a pool without updating their homeowner's policy. A guest slips at the party and files a lawsuit for $175,000 in damage. The thing about this is, while this wasn't my client, this was probably 8 or 9 years ago now, showed up to a family member's house when I was their insurance agent to a brand new pool in their backyard. They'd spent quite a pretty penny, but never thought to call me to tell me. So, this story is a very real thing. It happens a lot more than people would realize, but clients upgrade their homes. Again, they add these pools, and some things to consider for this would be, the importance of disclosing new risks to insurance agents. Does their current coverage actually cover the pool? So whether that's the liability and or the other coverage itself, because as we saw in the previous slide with the Lakens, they only on average extend 10% of your dwelling coverage to other structures. So depending on how elaborate the pool is, maybe they added some other features that standard other structures coverage may not suffice in that situation. And then are there exclusions? There's a lot of times where insurance companies actually exclude liability for pools. And if they don't exclude the pool themselves, they may exclude the slides or the diving boards that are installed, and or they may require like a fence to be around the pool in order for liability to extend. So there's a lot of things that can be triggered just by clients installing a pool. And as an advisor, one way you can help clients avoid this type of situation is just listen for the words, we're adding a pool, we're adding a patio, we're doing something to our outdoor space. And by listening for those, you can help them start to understand or at least consider a conversation with their insurance professional. For uninsured or underinsured and overexposed, this was a gap in liability, specifically around the umbrella policy, where a client had a backyard fire pit cause $800,000 in damage to a neighbor's home. The liability claim exceeded the homeowner's coverage of 500,000. So, one again, it isn't uncommon to see little things, just enjoying a backyard fire, go completely wrong, causing a lot of damage. With the 4th of July coming up, it's one of the higher times that we actually see, neighbors causing damage to others' homes, such as fires, due to those lovely fireworks we set off. So, some things to consider around that is one, liability is more than just about, guests getting injured. It also protects damage that clients may do to others' property property. If the net worth exceeds the liability on the homeowners, that's like the number one red flag that your clients need an umbrella. And I get net worth and their at-risk values don't always line up, but just for simplicity, if your client's net worth is over their liability on their home, make them or have them consider an umbrella policy just to make sure everything they're working hard for is properly protected. And again, that excess liability helps execute on that asset protection and preservation that you all are working so hard on. And again, just from an advisor standpoint, this is a great way for you easily to identify where their net worth may exceed their current liability limits and have a substantial gap in coverage, which obviously leads to an exposure. Then we have the cruise that sank the budget. This one was a client who had medical emergency while they were on an international cruise, and they were shocked by the out-of-pocket evacuation cost that was close to six figures. So, one, there is a misconception on the limitations that domestic health policies have when traveling abroad. So, health insurance is not my expertise, but I do know it's just as complex as personal insurance. And so, again, understanding that is an important piece for your clients before they start traveling. Um, the importance of travel specific policies for clients. So we covered that on the last slide, but really understanding what the clients are doing, the health that they currently are in, and what may arise. I've actually even seen some travel policies have accidental death benefits up to like $250,000. So if you do have those older clients that love to travel, maybe they can no longer get more life insurance, whatever that needs, that death benefit through a travel policy is a nice way to get a little bit of extra coverage so they can continue enjoying their travels with a peace of mind. And then lastly, just pay attention for those exclusions, not only around activities like scuba diving, but pre-existing conditions. And this became a really hot topic when COVID was around. I don't really know where things have all washed out in the last few years, but understanding the limitations in pre-existing conditions and travel policies is a really important piece before your clients invest in them because travel policies can become very expensive. And so, again, understanding what clients are paying for in those policies is important, but also understanding the flip side of if they do have injuries, medical evacuations, those sorts of things can add up quickly, and travel policies help protect that. So, paying attention to when clients say we're going abroad for the summer just triggers a whole new conversation from your perspective and just helping them understand from liability to travel insurance that they need to have a conversation with that insurance professional. And then lakeside liability. So this is a couple decides to rent out their lake house for the summer to make a little extra income, but they don't disclose this to their insurer. And a renter obviously injures themselves on the deck, and now the client has no coverage because most homeowners policies exclude business activity, which is what they categorize home sharing as. So this is a piece again of the puzzle where it's important to discuss with the insurance professional. They do have the ability to endorse some homeowners policies. So if your client really is only renting this out for a few weeks a year, sometimes an endorsement on the home policy will work just fine. Other times, if they're renting it out more than like half the year, a landlord policy may be a better way to cover this exposure. And again, a lot of that does depend on the carrier and their underwriting requirements for coverage. And then lastly, in some states, the short-term rental coverage can become really expensive and or limit market options, which could make that idea of renting the house a bad investment. A few years ago, I felt like I had this move of clients that was buying homes in Florida or condos in Florida that they were going to do short-term rentals on. And they were able to get a decent deal. They were doing the math, but they didn't consider the cost of insurance for that short-term rental. And at that time, it was really expensive. It took a basic condo policy from like 2,500 a year up to like 6,000 a year, all because of a short-term rental exposure, which obviously ate at a lot of the profits. So just know in certain states that we are seeing especially in states that have limited markets, we're seeing the cost of adding short-term rental exposure really make them become uncompetitive. And so again, what once was an easy choice of let's do some short-term rental, make some extra cash while we're not using the home is no longer an easy decision and could be pretty complicated based on the insurance options available. So, what are some ways you can help clients protect their fun in the sun? One is look out for these red flags. So we've talked about a lot of these different things through our case studies today, whether that's, them installing pools, outdoor structures, renovating, hosting at their home. One we didn't touch on too much is the teenagers or college kids that are back driving the family vehicle. So usually your client should leave their kids as drivers on the auto policy when they go away to school. There's a discount, excuse me, that's available on auto policies for kids that are over 100 miles away without a vehicle. And the intent of that discount is to show that these um, drivers are limited users and they really only rate them to kind of drive a few months out of the year in situations like they're home for the summer. So that's why when I was an agent, I would recommend the clients leave their kids on the policy, just add that discount because if you remove your kids from the policy, one, they're losing just some household coverages such as that uninsured and underinsured motorist that extends to them. But two, you have to remember to call the insurance agent when your kid comes back in town to add them as a driver in order for coverage to apply in most situations. And a lot of time when kids come home for college, you're just happy to see them. A lot of things are just moving parts, and calling your insurance agent to add them may not be the first thing on your list. But again, accidents happen quickly. So I think, again, those teenage drivers or college kids, the other thing to college kids to consider is maybe they're going to do some work over the summer. So I talked about the landscaper or the kid wanting to do some landscaping for the neighborhood. Obviously, his parents had some liability in that. If he is mowing the lawn and a rock shoots out and breaks a neighbor's window, his parents are going to be paying for that window, and their homeowner's policy may not pay for those damages because it was in the course of business. So, another example is maybe the kids are going to drive for Uber over the summer. In order to drive for Uber and the auto policy to extend coverage, they may want to add an endorsement for that ride sharing services. And if they don't, then there would be no liability coverage. So, if that college kid gets in an auto accident while Ubering, the parents could be on the hook for all of those damages. So, again, a lot of things to think through when it comes to the college age kids coming back home and just what they may do in those short 60 to 90 days while they're back. We talked a lot about international travel, obviously renting out or your home as a vacation rental, but also like when your clients rent homes for themselves to enjoy. Their personal liability may or may not extend, so it's important to understand any limitations that they have, really in case they damage that home that they're renting. So unlike if the damage is done by the fire, sometimes if there's contracts involved where your client signs saying they're taking possession of something, it might limit the coverage in the homeowner. So again, just understanding if liability and property coverage extend to the home that they're renting. Any new toys that are bought any time in the year, but a lot of times in the summer, we see things like boats, RVs, and ATVs. Um, Usually, if they're written with the same carrier as the home, auto, and umbrella, the likelihood of gaps between the umbrella and the underlying liability are less likely to occur. However, a lot of times with toys, we see those insured with progressives and the Geicos that aren't always where the home and umbrella are. And in those situations, we see a higher likelihood of the gap in coverage and something that, again, you can help your clients manage, whether it's in a current process or through the Holistic Plan system. We do see those gaps again in the toys quite frequently. Um, and then lastly, just the increased visitor. So making sure your clients have the right liability for the types of guests that they're going to have on premise. And I say that because while your clients may not all be high net worth, if they do have family members or friends that are high net worth people that are over at their house that might get injured while swimming in their pool and sue them for lost wages, having the appropriate liability can become extremely important. And then again, just clients that are unsure about what's covered or not covered, having them discuss those activities with an insurance professional, because as we know, or you may not know, insurance, our favorite word is it depends. So that is something, just like with anything else, the summertime, it will depend on the insurance carrier specifically. So just some ways to kind of start this conversation with your clients. What are your plans during the summer? Do you guys have any upcoming trips? Do you have any big projects? Will your kids be back home driving this summer? So the key with these questions, though, is that they're open-ended, because open-ended questions tend to reveal the largest gaps that are often missed in the everyday insurance conversations that your clients are having with an insurance professional. So again, this is a great way for you to get to know your clients a little bit better, add that personal touch, but also maybe provide a service or a conversation they've never really had with anyone before, which is those lifestyle questions and how they affect their personal insurance planning. And obviously the language, because you all do a lot already, and being an insurance expert is not something that you need to become by any means, but positioning yourself as that trusted partner. Obviously you can think of things like, sounds like you want to double check with your insurance professional, or you've done a great job building and protecting your wealth. Let's make sure your personal liability coverage keeps up with those exposed assets. Or this kind of situation can expose you to risk. Let me refer you to a specialist who can assess your coverages in the marketplace. So, again, really just helping you build trust with your clients and having the right network to refer them out to when it comes to having those in depth conversations for personal insurance planning. And then lastly, just really supporting your client's summer fun. The first is talking to them about their plans, like we've discussed. Listen for those key phrases. We're putting in a pool, we're renting out our lake house, we have someone watching the kids. The list goes on and on of really what you can listen for and what we've discussed today. And then lastly, consider using a software like Plan that can help you identify those gaps that we showed in the beginning. So with the lake and family, with Cole, with Cruise, those gaps aren't always easy to find, but most of them are found within our system by you just simply uploading a declaration page. We easily identify them for you, and then you can present them to your clients in a nice deliverable to help identify what matters most to them based on the different things that they're doing this summer. So I appreciate everybody for listening, and I would love to answer any questions we may have.
Hey, Megan.
Hey.
All right, we have a couple questions. So this first question says, my insurance provider wanted me to get a motorcycle policy for my electric bicycle. It has a small motor. Does this sound right?
That sounds very correct.
All right,
And the
there's the
reason
answer.
for that is the liability. Because again, your homeowner's policy doesn't cover it. So if you're on the road and you cause an auto accident or something like that, you're going to want the liability on that bike to protect you.
This next question comes from Louise. It says, the premium expense of increasing each case to optimal coverage Megan suggests. So it sounds like she's asking, what are the premium increments?
Yeah, so I'd say, liability's cheap. So again, going from 100,000 to 500,000 is $20 to $30 a year for your client. Same with medical payments. Going from 1,000 to $10,000 is like $7 or $8 a year. The dwelling difference does add a little bit, but when you look at it from my client's exposed, and we'll use the Lakin family as the example, they have a $300,000 exposure by being uninsured. An extra $500 for insurance isn't that bad, knowing you're covering a $300,000 gap. So I think some of the mindset that has to change around insurance is that it needs to be cheap, but in all reality, it's in retrospect to what are the gaps that we're filling and what does that cost. So again, for the Lakin family, I would assume the increase of 300,000 is about $500 to $1,000 a year to get that appropriate coverage for them to rebuild. So all in all, for most of these changes, your clients could expect anywhere from like $600 to $1,500 a year. But as you saw, they had over sometimes $1 million in exposed assets, but not carrying the appropriate liability. So really $1,500 is pennies in the bucket when you look at the gaps you were able to fill for that cost.
Yeah, seems well worth it. No question. So, Megan, those were all the questions that we had. Do you want to maybe jump into the software and give a little tour of Plan and what our new insurance product looks
Yeah,
like.
give me one moment and I can jump on in there.
All right.
So one of the cool things that we have, it's little, not totally summer, but we've added our new condo feature. So you can evaluate clients' condo policies, and let me just pull up the appropriate one. Oh, Laura, I may need to share a different screen. So I'm going to stop sharing for one moment. Perfect. All righty. Can you guys see the review now?
Yep, looks good.
Perfect. Okay. So a few things right now, what you're seeing is our new condo review. But I'm actually going to change this just because I want to show you the insight when it comes to our dwelling replacement cost that we were discussing. So what you'll notice is we do have the ability for advisors to complete a replacement cost for their clients. So this is something that we're really excited to give advisors the tool to. A lot of times, CoreLogic is the provider that we integrate with. This is the same provider that insurance professionals use. So you now can help your clients make sure that that gap that we pointed out with the Lakens can easily be identified. And a lot of times we find that by you just entering in your client's address, it quickly pulls out this information about the client's home. You then can go in and refine some materials. And this is where we see a large impact. And a lot of times clients, excuse me, insurance professionals will leave these as builder's grade or basic. And they do that because they want to keep the premium low so they can close the business for your client. They're not always thinking about what's in the client's best interest. So as you know, your clients do actually have some custom kitchens. They have a half bath that's custom, and they have a custom full. And by refining that, you now will notice, oh, excuse me, I need to recalculate. You'll now notice that the calculation goes up. When I close this, I'm now going to have an insight. Oh, I have to hit save. That is going to talk through the coverage of the home and the value that they may want to consider. So for this one, it appears that we're good because we have the replacement cost rider. And then what else did I want to show you? Oh, our lifestyle questions. So the other thing we discussed a lot today was these lifestyle choices. So Cruz had renovations going on in her home, so we could select that here. We're going to get insights. We now also had the household employee with the nanny. We had one client that had a pool on premise. We had another client that had a trampoline. So again, a lot of what we discussed is all found within our lifestyle choices. And by selecting these, you hit save, you'll now get insights around those different lifestyle choices. So you'll notice we have our renovation insights. So this one's specifically around coverage limitations that might occur while the renovations are going on. Another one is around contractor consideration. So a lot of times contractors will put what we call waiver of subrogation, which insurance companies do not like. So that's something your clients can talk to their insurance professional about as well as their contractor before they sign. We also have our builder's risk renovation. So for those larger projects, considering a builder's risk policy. We also talked through the household employee, and the household employee is a lifestyle piece that you'll see throughout all three products. So you'll see it on the homeowners, you'll also see it on the vehicle policy, and then lastly, you will see it on the umbrella policy. So these are all going to connect those dots that we discussed today during the call when it comes to employees driving. So this on the auto, it's going to talk about if they have regular access to the vehicle, and or on the flip side, if they're using their own vehicle to drive during the course of work. And then on the umbrella policy, we talk through those different coverages around employment practices, liability, and potentially workers' comp, depending on their needs. And then on the umbrella, we also have that ability to help you guys find that gap in the at-risk value. So as advisors, you're in a unique position to know typically your client's, portfolio and the assets that they have. So in this situation, if a client's net worth is $3 million. I can select that. I'm going to hit save. And now I'm going to have an insight that pops up that tells my clients that they may want to discuss with their insurance professionals the overall coverage that they have for their umbrella. And then we also call out those gaps in coverage. So remember, I discussed when it comes to like watercrafts and policies that tend to be with different carriers, we see a higher likelihood of there being a gap between underlying limits and what the umbrella requires them to carry. That's something our system will also point out for you, and we'll even put it within our agent letter for you, meaning this is what really bridges that gap between you starting this process with your clients, doing the declarations analysis, and then them actually talking to the insurance professionals, which is done by providing this agent letter, which takes all of our insights and turns them into questions that they can now get answered from that professional. And I probably started right in the middle of this review, so I'm going to take 2 steps back. If you've never used our system and you would like to start an insurance review, you're going to start back at the household. So it just looks like our normal household page. You have your tax stuff. You would then go to create this insurance review here. Once you click OK, you'll land on this page, which is where you're going to upload the different documents. You can either click or you can just drag and drop them into the specific spots. You hit upload, and then our OCR process does start. Note this does take a little longer than tax, typically a few hours. Maximum is 1 business day for you to get a review back. And that is because a human is reviewing the data for accuracy purposes. But it's as simple as that. We do the declaration analysis for you, and then you now would have a deliverable to take back to your client to again start that insurance risk review with them. Did I spark any new questions, Laura?
No new questions. I think the value add of this tool is amazing. So I think the goal at Holistic Plan is that we want to provide advisors with the ability to do comprehensive financial planning, not just investment management. And what you see, especially in today's economy, is that things are really uncertain. And so you can't just be managing investments. The way that you want to differentiate yourself as an advisor is by going above and beyond and offering tools like insurance reviews for the home, auto, and umbrella. Because what that does is that differentiates you from your competitors, but also keeps that client really sticky, right? No other advisor right now is going above and beyond and doing home, auto, and umbrella reviews yet, but it's one of the services that clients are really in demand. So a huge opportunity for you to be a value add and not necessarily be in the middle of doing property and casualty, but just like flagging those insights for your clients to then take back to their insurance provider to get adjusted so that when they do have, God forbid, something comes up, it doesn't come out of your share wallet, right? It comes out of the insurance. So
Yeah, I think Debbie Taylor shared on the summit, I think it was Asset Mark, showed like 72% of clients are wanting their advisors to talk about risk management, and 2% are at this point. So there's a big need and want from the clients to have these conversations, and we're hoping this tool gives you all the confidence to really start that, and hopefully more than 2% of advisors will continue to talk and really meet that need that clients have at this point when it comes to risk management.
yeah, we're just at the beginning, right? We are for insurance where tax planning was like 3 years ago, where it was just really the really early adopters. And so there's a huge opportunity for you to get ahead of that wave. Okay, couple questions. So this one comes from Richard. How much does the insurance feature cost?
So if it's bundled with tax, it's $15 a household. Standalone is 25 at this point.
Okay. And then is insurance only available on premium?
No, you can have basic or premium. Starting at 30 households, you can add insurance to your subscription.
All right. And then the other thing is I dropped a couple of links into the chat. So if you're interested in getting a demo, I dropped the link. You can go ahead and book a demo with an AE. We'll walk you through it. You can go as deep as you want. And then we also do offer a free trial. So if you want to go ahead and test and learn before you purchase, everything comes with the free 7-day trial. So
try it on yourself. You'd be surprised what you find out about yourself when you do this.
Absolutely.
So, well, thank you, everybody. I appreciate everyone's time.
All right. Thanks, Megan. We'll see you soon.